Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my week number 4 running back start or sit decisions for every single matchup of week number 4. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. I would also like to ask that if you guys have any questions about week number 4, to never hesitate and ask down below in the comment section. I love to talk to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 4 running back start or sit decisions. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins at the Cincinnati Bengals. In this matchup, there is only one running back that I'm willing to start, and that is going to be Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, through the first 3 games in half PPR, Joe Mixon has only finished inside the top 12 running backs once. Now, that is basically only because the offensive line in Cincinnati has been a turnstile. That offensive line has been awful. But at the end of the day, I don't want to panic just yet. I don't want to tell you guys that Joe Mixon is some fucking bum and that Joe Mixon can't finish as a top 12 running back any given week, because we all know deep inside that Joe Mixon has the talent to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 running back weekly. Now, the Miami Dolphins just got skull-fucked by Devin Singletary in week number 3. Now, much of that was done in the receiving game because he got a bunch of targets, but the Dolphins in the past, as well as this season, haven't been the greatest at stopping running backs. Their defense is much better at stopping the pass. So, up against the Dolphins, I definitely think Joe Mixon is a start-worthy running back. I wouldn't have him ranked inside of my top 12, but you definitely don't want to be sitting him. For the Miami Dolphins, they have Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, who both look good at points in the game. Last week, obviously, Chase Edmonds ended up being the better running back out of the two, but I think going into every single game, it is going to be incredibly difficult to decipher which running back you actually want to start for the Dolphins. If you had to ask me right now, Nick, gun to your head, would you rather start Chase Edmonds or Raheem Mostert? Right now, it's pretty clearly Chase Edmonds, but I think in this game, it wouldn't surprise me if Raheem Mostert easily outscored Mr. Chase Edmonds. So right now, I'm very nervous to start either of them. Plus, this Dolphins offense isn't really running the ball all that much. They're not running the ball all that frequently. They're having to throw the ball a lot in these games. So Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert are both kind of duds in my mind for this game. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, their backup is Samaje Perine. Sure, he'll have a game where he scores a touchdown or something, but very hard to predict. I'm sitting down Mr. Samaje Perine. Next up, we move to the Minnesota Vikings at the New Orleans Saints in England. Very sad that the Queen died, so she didn't get to see famous Jameis Winston versus Mr. You Like That, Kirk Cousins. Dalvin Cook is definitely going to be a start in this game if he is able to play. Now, on Sunday, things seemed extremely grim for Dalvin Cook. People are talking about maybe he misses not only this game in London, but he's also going to miss a couple of games after that. And now, as I'm recording this on Wednesday, it seems more and more like Dalvin Cook will play. Even if he does play, though, I don't expect him to be the normal Dalvin Cook seeing that normal workload. But he definitely, if he's able to play, is a guy that you have to start. The Saints defense hasn't been the best thus far this season, despite entering the season, that defense looking incredibly strong. Alvin Kamara has been a dud for the first 2 games he played. He missed week number 2, played in week 1 and week number 3. But again, when you have a player with the skill set, when you have a player with the talent of Alvin Kamara, I'm not going to jump ship after 2 bad games. You're still going to want to start him in what could be an incredibly high-scoring game between the New Orleans Saints at the Minnesota Vikings. Even though, not at the Minnesota Vikings, the Saints going up against the Vikings. This game is technically at the Saints, but again, it is in England. Now, there's also the scenario where Dalvin Cook doesn't play. which again, I won't rule that out. I definitely think it's possible that Dalvin Cook could miss. If he does miss, I want to be starting Alexander Mattison. He enters must-start category because he is going to see a boatload of carries and potentially receptions up against the Saints. When Alvin Kamara is healthy, I don't want to play Mark Ingram. It's as simple as that. I understand that Marky Mock Ingram ended up scoring last week, but that is not the usual. Alvin Kamara is the clear workhorse running back on this team. Next up, we move to the Cleveland Browns at the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. 9-inch Nicholas Chubb is a must-start running back every single week. Now, going into fantasy football drafts, I was someone that didn't necessarily shit on Nick Chubb. All I said was that Nick Chubb doesn't excite me. He doesn't really have any pass-catching abilities, and I worried that this Browns offense had the potential to be an unmitigated fucking disaster without Deshaun Watson. I personally am a Dolphins fan. I watched a ton of Jacoby Brissett last season when Tua Tagovailoa was hurt, and Jacoby Brissett looked like dog shit. Jacoby Brissett was awful. This year, Jacoby Brissett has really stepped up, and this Browns offense has been amazing. They want to run the ball a lot with 9-inch Nicholas Chubb, so Nick Chubb does have that top 5 potential that I did not see in the offseason, and obviously he's a guy that you want to be starting game in and game out. Kareem Hunt also has the upside to vulture some points from Nick Chubb. We saw week number 1 how Kareem Hunt found pay dirt multiple times. I think up against the Atlanta Falcons, that is always possible. Kareem Hunt is one of the safer plays in fantasy football. He's probably going to get you like 8 to 12 points, but if he has a big game, he could score 20 or 25 points, especially up against a defense like the Falcons. And based upon how the Browns played on Thursday Night Football up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, if these two teams are firing on all cylinders, the Falcons are not necessarily good, but they're sneaky good. They can keep up with these teams. They could go tit for tat with the Cleveland Browns. And I think that is a game script in which Kareem Hunt could have a big game because they're having to throw the ball more. They can't just rely on running the ball with 9-inch Nicholas Chubb. So while I definitely like Nick Chubb more, I think Kareem Hunt is a start-worthy running back. Cordarrelle fucking Patterson. Ever since last year, when the head coach of the team, Arthur Smith, rolled out the coffin of Cordarrelle Patterson, dusted that bitch off, and took him out, it's been unreal. It's been an unreal run for Cordarrelle Patterson, considering how old this man is and how dominant he has been. He's a guy that most people probably would have said Cordarrelle Patterson was a bust. But randomly, he had his 10th year breakout last season, and he's been amazing. He's had 2 weeks this year, 2 out of 3 games with over 100 rushing yards. The Browns defense is definitely tough, but Myles Garrett probably not going to be playing in this game after he got into that car accident. So I think Cordarrelle Patterson has the upside to be a top 5 back. We might see 2 top 5 running backs come out of this game with 9-inch Nicholas Chubb and Cordarrelle Patterson. So I'm definitely excited to start Patterson every single week. And to me, he is a must-start running back. They also have Tyler Algier and a couple of other running backs that will see touches. But at the end of the day, Cordarrelle Patterson truly is the guy in the offense, and he has great pass-catching abilities. Next up, we move to the Buffalo Bills at the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I know there was a lot of people last week that said that the Bills were going to steamroll the Miami Dolphins. What happened? Told you guys all week the Dolphins were going to win. Of course, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm going to think they're going to win every game. Just like up against the Bengals, we're going to bend Joe Shiesty over and fuck him into the night, and we are going to destroy them. Easy game. In reality, is that what's going to happen? Probably not, but I'm going to always talk positively about the Dolphins. But in terms of fantasy football, I don't. But in real life, I'm like, go Dolphins, baby. I always tweet about that. If you don't follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. I always tweet out me hitting the Waddle dance every time Jalen Waddle scores. So this is a game with a lot of running backs that are uninteresting, right? J.K. Dobbins comes back. He doesn't really do much. J.K. Dobbins is listed as a start in today's video, but he's not one of those upper echelon starts. He's not even a start that I'm very confident in. He is a starting player. I'm fine starting him, but there are some players that are listed as a sit in today's video. For instance, Devin Singletary. If you told me, Nick, I actually want to play Singletary over J.K. Dobbins, I'm not going to have a big argument with you. I think Dobbins is clearly the guy in Baltimore, especially with Gus Bus Edwards out. I like J.K. Dobbins as a talent. The problem is do the Baltimore Ravens need to hand the ball off all that many times to win? They like to run the ball, but Lamar could just run the ball, and Lamar's looked incredible. This game also up against the Bills. The Bills defense, when healthy, is pretty decent against the run. Chase Edmonds was good last week, but again, the defense was banged up in Buffalo. So J.K. Dobbins isn't the most ideal start this week. Devin Singletary has a great game against the Dolphins, but basically anyone with eyes could have seen that coming. I probably should have talked that up more because the Buffalo Bills running back Devin Singletary legitimately always balls out against the Dolphins. He could be having a shit season. He could be averaging 1.4 yards per carry, and against the Dolphins defense, the man's going to go insane. This week up against the Ravens, I don't really forecast him to have all that big of a game. Zach Moss, the other running back there. They also use James Cook. All these running backs in Buffalo. Just doesn't seem like the Bills, if they're winning the game, they don't even need to use the running back. They're just going to keep throwing the ball. Justice Hill is the other running back of the Baltimore Ravens. There was a run up against the Dolphins 2 weeks ago for Justice Hill, where he makes a nice run. It is fucking wide open for him to just run straight. Like, he literally could have scored a touchdown. Maybe he wouldn't have scored a touchdown, but he would have gotten like a 30-yard gain. Instead, he cuts outside and then runs towards the sideline where the defenders are. And then I'm thinking, okay, Justice Hill's going to break back in. He's going to cut back in, cut upfield, and run in for a touchdown. Instead, he just runs like out of bounds. The guy has the vision of fucking Stevie Wonder. So Justice Hill is not very helpful for your fantasy team, especially with J.K. Dobbins back. Next up, we move to the Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys. Carson fucking Wentz. The Carson Wentz experience came out in week number 3. We all knew deep down that this run that Wentz was on was likely to stop. Wentz week 1, week 2, the guy was amazing. But in week 3, when he has the revenge game up against the Eagles, he couldn't get it up. He was in need of a Cialis or a Viagra or one of those gas station pills that are $4 that make you as hard as a rock, okay? The Commanders looked bad. Extremely bad. Antonio Gibson is averaging 3.1 yards per carry, which is the worst of his career thus far. Can Gibson turn things around? Yes. But if Gibson didn't score last week, the motherfucker would have scored 3 fantasy points. The Dallas Cowboys defense is legit. They just got gashed by Saquon Barkley, but Antonio Gibson is nowhere near the same echelon as a guy like Saquon Barkley. So, I'm worried about Antonio Gibson, and I've talked about this a lot. If you have Antonio Gibson on your team and there are people that need a running back, try to trade away Antonio Gibson, because there is a reasonable scenario where next week, week 4, if you go out on the IR, you have 4 weeks you're spending on the IR. Brian Robinson could legitimately return in week number 5 and take that role from Antonio Gibson as the number 1 guy. Now, is that a lock to happen? Of course not. Of course it's not. The guy got shot a couple of weeks ago. But from what I've seen out of Brian Robinson, he looks like he's ready to go. And Antonio Gibson looks like he's ready to run 3 yards per fucking carry, which is going to not bode well for Antonio Gibson. So right now, he's on a hot streak. He's looking good. But I really do think when Robinson returns, this backfield is going to be all shook up. And I think Antonio Gibson is going to struggle. This week against Dallas, he's a fine start. Not ideal. Zeke, finally, after the first 2 games of the season, turns things on Monday Night Football up against the Giants. I was at that game. It was a very fun environment. The Giants versus the Cowboys. I'm a Dolphins fan, so obviously didn't really care who won. I was rooting for the Giants. I thought it was fun. Zeke looked decent, but you will notice when watching in real life that Zeke looks even slower than he does on TV, and Pollard looks legitimately good. But the team, Fat Mike McCarthy, the fucking Kool-Aid man, continues to want to churn things with Zeke. Keep feeding the rock to Zeke. And even though everyone watching the fucking games knows Tony Pollard is better, it doesn't matter. Jerry Jones still on his knees, gawk 9,000 for Ezekiel Elliott. So Zeke's going to continue to get the carries. Again, I don't love starting him every week, but he's definitely a start-worthy running back. There are a lot worse running backs than Ezekiel Elliott. J.D. McKisson Titties is going to be a sit for me. He just doesn't get enough work. And then Tony Pollard, again, if you're in a deeper league, I know why you might want to start him, but the issue is the team clearly wants the ball to run with Ezekiel Elliott, not Tony Pollard. Next up, we move to the Seattle Seahawks at the Detroit Lions. I was someone in the offseason who was big on DeAndre Swift. I love DeAndre Swift, and I also talked about Jamal Williams' upside if Swift was to get hurt. Sadly, Swift is now hurt, and I have heard that this injury might take a couple of weeks to recover from. This injury, unlike Dalvin Cook's of the Minnesota Vikings, seems incredibly serious. This seems like DeAndre Swift is actually going to miss the games. Now, Jamal Williams right now is a fucking top 10 running back in fantasy football because he continues to vulture touchdowns. The guy has 4 touchdowns on the season. And now there is no competition of DeAndre Swift being there. Craig Reynolds, sure, he's a backup. We saw him last year. He's okay, right? He's okay, but he's not going to be taking away touches from Jamal Williams. And Jamal, with 2 A's Williams, now is facing up against the fucking Seahawks defense. This has all the makings of, if you've ever seen the Powerpuff Girls, it's like sugar, spice, and everything nice all together for Jamal Williams to have a huge game up against Seattle. If you told me, Nick, I think Jamal Williams might be a top 5 running back in week numero 4, I would tell you that's not crazy. Jamal Williams is potentially in a humongous spot here, a big spot to succeed. I love Jamal Williams up against the Seattle Seahawks. Rashad Penny is one of the guys that I was blatantly wrong about. Now, maybe I wasn't wrong about the talent because I still think he's a good player, but the situation is, as they would say, no bueno in Seattle, despite Pete Carroll loving to run the ball. This motherfucker would love to run the offense like it was 1950s football. But this year, things have changed. He's trying to throw the ball more. Yeah, no, let's throw the ball more with Geno than we would with Russell Wilson. Makes a lot of sense, right? So Penny has been screwed. They have Kenneth Walker. They have these other running backs they want to use. It sucks. Now, am I someone who wants to cut ties with Rashad Penny in a deeper league? I wouldn't. But if I'm in like an 8 or 10 team league, there's really no reason to be rostering Rashad Penny at this point. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he takes the Detroit Lions out back like they're hunting for rabbits and shoot him in the back of the head like Lenny in that book of Mice and Men. But at the end of the day here, we got to be reasonable. And I will admit when I'm wrong. Rashad Penny hasn't looked good. This matchup is good against the Lions. I just honestly don't trust him enough to start him. Next up, we move to the LA Chargers at the Houston Texans. The Texans choke the game away up against the Bears. Davis, Money, Mills, the giraffe neck man himself, chokes the game. The Chargers lose to the Jaguars. They get, not just lose, they get fucking waxed. Waxed by Doug Peterson, Trevor Lawrence, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Justin Herbert, the pervert, doesn't look the same. This is not the same Justin Herbert from prior to the injury. Now, does that mean that I think that Justin Herbert is some bum or something? No, it just means that I think Justin Herbert, he's going to play because he's a strong man. He's going to want to play, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best case scenario for the Chargers right now. Austin Eckler has been hit or miss. He's not in the same role he was in last year. They clearly want to use other running backs behind him, like, for example, Sony Michel. Now, again, does that mean that I think that Austin Eckler's a bad player? No, I just don't think he's in the best situation. He still has that weekly upside to be the number 1 running back in fantasy football because of how talented he is, or how talented he is when he gets the ball in his hands. If Justin Herbert just dumps the ball off to him 6 times a game, then Eckler could be a top 5 running back in fantasy. I'm just saying I worry slightly because they want to mix in more running backs. You're obviously still going to be starting Austin Eckler, but my confidence in him being the number 1 running back at the end of the year right now is at an all-time low. Dameon Pierce, my guy, Dameon Pierce has been balling. Dameon Pierce, week 3 looks good. Week 1 and 2, people start to panic, but it takes some time for these rookie running backs. The reason why people panicked on Pierce is because he was initially a couple of months ago, like around 10, 11, 12 selection. And then he starts climbing up and up and up and up the draft board until he's like a 5th or 6th round pick. And then when you draft a running back in the 5th or 6th round and they're not useful the first couple of games, people start to shit themselves. People start to panic. I told you guys, do not panic on Dameon Pierce. It's going to take some time. He's a rookie. Because if you drafted him in the 10th round, you would have said that. You would have thought, oh, he's a rookie. Rex Burkhead's there, but Rex Burkhead isn't very good. Give it a couple of weeks. But since you drafted him so early, you started getting your panties in a bunch. Don't worry about Dameon Pierce. He's in a good spot now. The Chargers defense is definitely tough, so I'm not banging the drum for a top 10 week out of Pierce, but I think at the end of the season, Pierce could finish inside of the top 12 at the running back position. Sony Michel, again, he mixes in, but he's not really all that fantasy relevant. Rex Burkhead, week 1, oh, he looks so good. Come on, man. We all know it's Dameon Pierce season. Next up, we move to the Les Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. But before we can move on into this breakdown of the Les Titans at the Indianapolis Colts, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends, our sponsor of today's video. They've been on the screen the entire video, Underdog Fantasy. Are your best ball teams already cooked? Well, head on over to Underdog Fantasy to resurrect them in their best ball resurrection tournament with their week 6 through week 17 tournament. The entry fee is only $10 with $500,000 in total prizes and $100,000 to first place. All you got to do is draft your team. That's it. You don't have to worry about calling up your buddy trying to make a trade. He's too busy with his girlfriend. He's watching his kids or something. What a fucking loser, right? Wake up, pal. It's time to make a trade. And then you don't have to worry about waivers either. On Tuesday, staying up all night, clicking through all the waivers. It takes forever. And you don't even have to worry about screwing things up with your team and starting the wrong player because Underdog will automatically set your lineup at the end of the week with the highest scores every single week. Underdog also features daily and best ball contests for the MLB, the NBA, the PGA, as well as the NHL so that you can get action all year long. All you got to do is click on the link in the video description down below or use promo code Stokastic for a $100 first match deposit bonus. So you deposit $100, they will give you an additional $100, which is 10 free entries into the Best Ball Resurrection Tournament. My favorite thing about fantasy football is drafting. Sure, I love watching the games, but the most fun part of the year for me is doing my fantasy drafts. So now you can even draft during the season. They have weekly NFL contests. For instance, Thursday Night Football, Bengals, Dolphins. You can draft a team just for that game. It is incredibly fun. Make sure you guys do check that out. So back on into things. The Les Titans at the Indianapolis Colts, and I will keep this one short like Kyler Murray, and we're going to go ahead and go with starting Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. Shocker, right? Who would have guessed you would start two guys that were drafted inside the first round of fantasy drafts? Now, week 1, week 2, Derrick Henry is looking sluggish. He's running slow. He's not looking like the old Derrick Henry. People start to panic. People panic way too early in fantasy football. I told everyone, don't fucking panic. Don't whip the white flag out and surrender on Derrick Henry. He's going to be just fine. And you saw what he did in week number 3. He came out up against the Las Vegas Raiders and had a hell of a game. So going forward, we know it's still the same old Derrick Henry. I am still under the impression that the Titans aren't that great of a team, but under their head coach, Mike Vrabel, I think that they're always prone, even if they're not as good of a team, to be scrappy because Vrabel is an excellent head coach. Again, I'm starting Derrick Henry. I'm starting Jonathan Taylor. You don't have to think twice about Jonathan Taylor. The Colts, congrats on finally getting a fucking win, being 1-1-1. I told you guys last week, this is a sneaky game for the Colts. Everyone thinks the Chiefs are going to butt fuck them without the use of lube, but we saw what happened, baby. The Colts ended up eating that W, famous Jameis style. Dontrell Hilliard, bench him, and then Naheem Hines. I mean, he's seeing some work, but unless he finds the end zone, he's not really going to have any fantasy relevance. Next up, we got just such an interesting game. The Bears at the New York Football Giants. Saquon Barkley looking great. He's looked great through the first 3 games of the season. I know he kind of had a bit of a fall off in week 2. He was still decent. Week 1, week 3, excellent. I saw the guy in person. He looks fantastic. You're obviously going to be starting Saquon Barkley. Now, David Montgomery also seems like he is going to be out on Sunday. Now, again, with any of these injuries, make sure that you monitor things. Make sure that you are paying attention because there's always a chance that one of these guys just ends up getting the nod to play. But right now, as I'm recording this on Wednesday, my best bet would be that Khalil Herbert is the starting running back on the team. Khalil Herbert has looked really good this season when given the opportunity. Last week, especially up against the Houston Texans, this team wants to run the ball. That's why David Montgomery has been good, despite David Montgomery not necessarily being the most talented player, because they want to continue to run the ball at a very high rate. Now, I've talked about this a couple of times. I don't know if the Bears don't trust Justin Fields. I don't know what it is, because it really makes no sense to be running the ball that much. Really doesn't. The Bears somehow beat the Texans because the Texans choke. Khalil Herbert looks great in that game, so I'm going to fire Khalil Herbert out again. We're obviously playing Barkley. I don't think Dave Montgomery's playing, so we're sitting him. And then Matt Breida looks like a good handcuff for Barkley if he got hurt. Knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, but unless that was to happen, Barkley's definitely a start, and Breida is definitely a sit. Next up, we move to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders has been a guy that you start every week, and let's be honest, this guy is not exciting at all. He doesn't really bring anything interesting to your fantasy team. He's probably going to score 8 to 14 points. He's probably going to be a decent RB2 or flex option, and he's nothing special. He's not going to win you your week, but he's also more than likely just going to be good enough to where he's not going to screw your team over. You're not like, oh, fuck, I lost because I started Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is like missionary sex. It's just basic, you know? Whereas James Robinson, on the other side of the ball, this dude's like doing fucking the wheelbarrow position or some nice reverse cowgirl, okay? James Robinson is in position to legitimately be the number one running back in fantasy football. I have been a big fan of James Robinson ever since I picked him up a few years ago when we saw Leonard Fournette get traded. James Robinson has been excellent. The story on this guy is crazy. This man gets hurt so deep into last season. Everyone counts him out. But then magically in week 1, where I thought, oh, you know what? Robinson's still a little bit banged up. I don't think he's going to get a lot of touches. Let's go with ETN. And then ETN doesn't do good. Robinson does great. And then week 2, I'm like, okay, this is the last ride for ETN. If Robinson outscores him again and ETN looks bad, then we're just playing Robinson going forward. And then week 3, it was start Robinson. Now it's start Robinson. And unless Travis Etienne has an epiphany and starts playing great, we're going to keep starting James Robinson and we're going to keep sitting Travis Etienne. This Jaguars team is churning. Everything is positive for this Jaguars offense. They've looked great. Doug Peterson legitimately took Trevor Lawrence, who was a broken toy after Urban Meyer screwed with him, and now has shifted Trevor Lawrence into that beautiful mold that we thought he was going to have coming out of college at Clemson. This team looks great. Now, we got another revenge game. We have Doug Peterson, who won a Super Bowl with the Eagles against the Patriots. I'm sure you remember that. Going up against his former team. Should be incredibly interesting. I like James Robinson. I love the revenge game narrative, so I'm a big fan of James Robinson this week. Travis Etienne just hasn't looked good. Let's be honest. This guy looks like a bust, a colossal bust where you drafted him. Am I cutting him? No, because like realistically, Etienne is like, now obviously you don't want to draft your handcuff in the 4th or 5th round, but he's like the best handcuff in the NFL. But right now, things aren't looking so sweet for ETN. Gainwell has that upside every week to catch some passes. He's a better pass catcher, in my opinion, than Sanders, but he's not a guy you want to be starting. They're not one of those teams where you want to be starting 2 running backs because of how much Monsieur Jalen Hurts, looking like maybe MVP Jalen Hurts, runs the ball. Now we got the New York Jumbo Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The return of the MILF hunter, Zach Wilson. Now, let me give an honest evaluation about Zach Wilson real quick. Personally, I'm someone that doesn't love Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson didn't do much last year to wow me. Could I be wrong about Zach Wilson? Definitely. Only played 1 year, so I'm not going to tell you, oh, Nick, do you think Zach Wilson's a bust? No, I don't think Zach Wilson's a bust. I'm just being honest with you. I'll call a spade a spade. I didn't think he looked great. But now they play up against the Steelers. Breece Hall and Michael Carter were benefiting heavily from cool Joe Flacco being just scared and dumping the ball off a million times. Dumping the ball off to Breece Hall and Michael Carter. Much of the reason why Breece Hall had a good game last week was because of the targets. Now again, am I panicking on Breece Hall? Am I saying you need to cut Breece Hall? No, he's a rookie running back. It's going to take time. He could literally be a league fucking winner and be a top 5 running back from weeks 10 through the end of the season. I definitely could see that happening. But right now, week 1 of Zach Wilson coming back, I'm just not too sure that Zach Wilson is the same dump-off machine that Joe Flacco is. So right now, I'm sitting Breece Hall. Now again, if it's Breece Hall versus some other running back, if you ask in the comment section, please do if you have any questions, I might tell you to start Breece Hall. But I'm not ideally, in an ideal world, I don't want to have to play Breece Hall against the Steelers. I know TJ Watt isn't there, but the Steelers defense is still pretty decent against the run. I know they got destroyed last week by Nick Chubb, Najee Harris. I'm just going to continue to start him. He hasn't looked great through the first 3 games of the season. I'll be honest. Jaylen Warren has looked good, but Mr. Mike Tomlin does one thing every year, and that is use a workhorse running back. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell. We saw it with James Conner. We've seen it with Najee Harris. They want to use one sole back. So even if Najee Harris hasn't looked the best, this is definitely a worse version of Najee Harris compared to what we saw last season with Big Ben Roethlisberger. I think Najee Harris will still be able to get it done. Maybe a change to Kenny Pickett that seems almost imminent at this point will be a boost for Najee Harris, but again, I'm not panicking too much. Not a guy I'd have ranked in the top 10, but should be decent against the Jets defense. Again, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, they're going to be sits for me. Maybe next week we see, holy shit, now with Zach Wilson under center, we're seeing a lot of Breece Hall. We're not seeing much Michael Carter. Then boom, I'm more excited about Hall, but right now, I just sit down all the backs listed again. Hall, Carter, and Warren all sit. Next up, we got the Arizona Cardinals at the Carolina Panthers. In this game, James Conner, look, let's be honest, he hasn't been good. James Conner has not looked great through the first 3 games. Now, has he been awful? No, but he hasn't looked great. He was banged up going into last week's game. The Panthers' defense hasn't been the best. They have decent secondary. I just think James Conner could have a good game. Now, again, I'm not calling for like a top 5 performance or something, but I think he's a start-worthy running back. Matt Rule has basically fucked with everything. And so has Baker Mayfield, because DJ Moore should be amazing. He gets a large target share, but he's not good for fantasy. Christian McCaffrey, arguably one of the best, if not the best running back in the National Football League, isn't great. It's concerning. It's very concerning. But again, in what fucking world are you sitting Christian McCaffrey? Because we all know just the crazy amount of upside that he has. Benjamin, the other running backs in Arizona sit. Same with Donta Foreman and the other Panthers running backs. I hope, because I was really high on James Conner, that he starts to turn things around going forward. This Cardinals team just has not been what I thought they were going to be. I'm not saying that they can't make the playoffs or something, because the NFC is soft as baby shit, okay? So they could easily make the playoffs, but they don't look like the Cardinals team that I thought they were going to look like at this point in the season, especially since Cliff Kingsbury offenses historically, and the team starts off so strong. They always start off on fire, NBA Jam style, and then they kind of peter off, right? But right now, normally during the hot start, they're not very hot at all. Next up, we got the New England Deflatriots at the Green Bay Packers. This game sucks. It does. I'm just being honest. Mac Jones gets hurt, high ankle sprain. That sucks. That sucks. He looked like he was in immense pain. I felt terrible for him. Again, I hate the Patriots. I don't like Mac Jones. But if I see someone get hurt like that, obviously I'm not like, oh, hallelujah, right? It's like, that sucks. I hope Mac Jones is able to recover, and I hope that Mac Jones is able to come again and play this season, come back and play, because some reports don't seem the most positive about him coming back this season. The Patriots under Brian Hoyer, Jeez Louise. Hopefully they call up fucking Gardner Minshew or something and can get a quarterback in there that isn't boring. This game might be the skull fucking of the century. The Packers just came off of a snooze fest of a win up against Tampa Bay, Tom Brady, and the Buccaneers. Neither Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon look good. Now, normally, one of them does good, the other one does decent. Last week was the rare anomaly where both of them suck donkey cock in terms of fantasy football. I still like Jones more than Dillon, but there's a reason to start both of them, because this might be a disaster. A disaster for the Patriots, where they are just getting pounded. Because again, the Patriots defense is good, but eventually the defense gives up. They don't try as hard. Because if Brian Hoyer can't get it up, if Brian Hoyer can't move this offense, then the defense is going to be like, well, fuck, we're just going to lose this game. I'm just going to stop trying as hard. And then Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon can have a field day. Next up, we got the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. Mr. Unlimited. Mr. Unlimited. Would you like my Danger Witch? Fuck you, Russell Wilson. You piece of shit. Russell Wilson had us all fooled. This offense has me fooled. They do. They do. Javonte Williams looks amazing. Melvin Gordon vultures the touchdown, which is what I worried about in the offseason. Javonte Williams is incredible. This offense, on paper, looks unstoppable. But then you get to Sunday, and Nathaniel Hackett is an idiot. The guy needs one of those dunce caps. Dude's a fucking idiot. This team concerns me immensely. Besides Cortland Sutton, this team seems like a disaster. Javonte Williams is going to be fine. He's going to put up points. He's going to have big games. But am I excited to play him? No. Going to start him. He'll do decent. But again, it's like, figure it out, Nathaniel Hackett. Figure it out. For the Raiders, Josh Jacobs, one of the guys that gets a lot of opportunities, doesn't do much with it. If he finds pay dirt, he's a fine start. If he doesn't score, which is pay dirt, then he won't be good. The Raiders' offense doesn't look the best. The Raiders are 0-3. Devontae Adams gonna go back on his phone and be like, hey, Aaron, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, pal. Maybe I shouldn't have left. Will you have me back? And then Rodgers will hang up on him, just like he hangs up on his family when they try to call him. So Josh Jacobs, he's okay. But again, far from an ideal start. Melvin Gordon III, Sir Melvin Gordon III, he's okay. He's going to have games where he scores. He's going to have games where he gets like 5 points. Unless Javonte Williams gets hurt, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries. There's really no use to play Melvin Gordon unless the Broncos transcend into this elite offense we think they could be. Brandon Bolden of the Raiders is a sit. The Kansas City Chiefs at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a masterclass of an awful game last week against the Colts. Still puts up fantasy points. But a bad game. People on Twitter are starting to have a meltdown around Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Look, the guy's been great for the first 2 games. If he has one down game, you shouldn't be fucking selling him for a half-eaten bag of Doritos. You should be perfectly fine playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So don't panic on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Don't be an idiot. Don't overthink things. Keep Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The Buccaneers defense is great. So, like, if there was ever a week for Edwards-Helaire to be a sit, it would be this game. But I don't think that he's just a bad player and needs to be traded away. Again, this game isn't the best for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm still going to start him, but I don't expect a top 10 finish here. Leonard Fournette promised us a touchdown and lied straight to my fucking face. He didn't score last week, but hey, I still love Uncle Lenny. It's still very clear that he's the workhorse back on this team. When the Bucs figure it out, again, when they figure it out, I don't think if they figure it out. I'm saying when, because I know they're going to figure it out. I know Tampa Bay Tom Brady is eventually going to turn into this crazy player that he's always been. He's going to be great. The team's going to be great. Maybe it takes some time. Maybe it's a slow pitter-patter. It's a wait. But then eventually, when things turn on, they're going to turn on to the maximum. Fire up Leonard Fournette every week. Don't even think about it. Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, these other running backs for the Chiefs, they play, but Edwards-Helaire is the guy. Rashad White, interesting handcuff. But again, they want to be using Uncle Lenny. This game is actually Sunday Night Football, so should be a decent game. Now we move to Monday Night Football with the LA Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm laughing because of Jimmy Garoppolo. This man did the fucking Orlovsky, where he runs back through the end zone for a safety. How do you do that? How do you do that? And then my favorite part of the game, which I've seen a bunch on Twitter, is when, I don't know when this was, but they zoom in on Jimmy Garoppolo. Oh, I should have closed this eye so it makes sense, you know? They zoom on into Jimmy Garoppolo, and Jimmy Garoppolo's like, these play calls are shit, or something like that. That play call was awful. It's very funny. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, Savoca said this on our stream on the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel from earlier today. Make sure you're subscribed on there. I stream every day, Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m., me and Savoca, that he's on full DGAF mode, which means I don't give a fuck mode. Like, it's very funny to see. Like, they tossed him to the side for Lance, which I think is the right move, but now he's like, whatever, it is what it is. I'm getting paid all these big bucks. He's not looking the best. Jeff Wilson Jr., though, looks incredible. Now, the 49ers are cursed with running back injuries, but they didn't really use Jordan Mason, who I thought they might use. They just kept throwing Jeff Wilson out there. Tyrion Davis-Price is hurt. Elijah Mitchell is hurt. So it's Jeff Wilson Jr. season. As far as I'm concerned, the Rams defense is good against the run, definitely. But I definitely want to play Jeff Wilson because they want to run the ball with him. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. How do they have a bad game in that matchup? How do they both play bad? Cam Akers seems to be the guy now. Darrell Henderson's going to get touches. Just seems like a bad scenario to be in. And against the Niners defense, like maybe if they were playing up against, run it back against the Falcons, then I'll fire up Cam Akers. But against the 49ers, no bueno. No bueno for Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson. Again, Jordan Mason is a sit. So thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And if you have any other questions about week number 4, let me know down below in the comment section. I love talking to you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.